What's going on, everyone? Phil here, and welcome to KO Gaming. Last year, in early 2015, I had the opportunity to play and review a game called Dragon Ball Xenoverse, which took a unique hybrid of RPG-style elements, including a leveling system with equipped abilities and loot that would upgrade your created character, along with the wide cast of characters and lore of the Dragon Ball Z universe. Now, this game, although it was pretty interesting for people who were huge fans of the Dragon Ball franchise, ended up coming up short for pretty much everyone else, because if you didn't know who these characters were, and you didn't already have previous knowledge of the entire Dragon Ball plotline, you probably would have absolutely no idea what this game was about. And quite honestly, I do feel that the game had a lot of shortcomings, things that could have been improved, technical aspects that definitely should have been tweaked and maybe brought into a more modern era of console gaming. And so here we are in late 2016 with the release of Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2, and at first glance you may say, wow, that was pretty quick, only a year and a half, and there's already a sequel out. So, does the sequel improve upon the things that definitely needed improvement from the first installment? Does the game find a way to break into a more widestream audience? Let's talk a bit in my review. There would honestly be nothing more pleasing to me than to be able to tell you that the game developers of Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 directly listened to the criticisms of the first game and responded. And you know what? Honestly, in a lot of ways, I think they did. First and foremost, the graphics. Even though they look almost identical to those of Dragon Ball Xenoverse 1 during screenshots, as you can see here in this full quality video, the game now runs at a full 60 frames per second. This is awesome to see your favorite Dragon Ball Z characters in full motion, having so many frames and just looking really spiffy with all of their combat animations. This was a huge complaint of a lot of people last year, and so it was one of the biggest improvements in my opinion. In addition, there is now a tremendous amount of moves, equipable items, outfits, and ways to customize your character that definitely expanded upon that formula from the original Xenoverse game. So in a lot of ways, it definitely makes sense. In addition, the hub city is, even though it's supposed to be based on the same city from the first game, was dramatically improved. You're not hearing the same exact song playing throughout the entire game, droning on and on ad nauseum like it was last time around. And there are other little things here and there that are definitely improvements. More trainers who'll teach you more abilities for your warriors. More side content, including not only those parallel quest grinding style missions that were present in the first game, but also now there's separate worlds, 5 of them in fact, that have different kinds of side content, other people who will send you off on missions for specific plot lines and what if scenarios, and basically there's just a heck of a lot more to do in Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 than there ever was in the first game. So if you're a fan of the first game and you played it and you were looking for lots of improvements upon that existing formula, then this is definitely going to be a positive. However, much like Dragon Ball Xenoverse 1, this sequel, once again, kind of assumes that you have previous knowledge not only of the Dragon Ball Z franchise this time around, but that you've already played the original game. That's right, a huge assumption of the game developers is that you liked the first game and wanted to play the second one. In fact, lots of critical things to know about the game, including the basic game tutorials to learn different kinds of combat abilities, are hidden in a side content menu of an NPC. If you didn't ever talk to that NPC, you wouldn't even know half of the way to play the game. It's just assumed you already have been playing the first one and you knew how to do it from the get-go. It's really jarring. No backstory is really given at all besides an intro cutscene about why you're traveling through time, who the actual antagonists are of this story, and why the heck they're doing what they're doing. And just even the main character from the last game who makes a surprise appearance, especially if you've imported your game data from Xenoverse 1, they'll actually retain their appearance from the original game, is here without any kind of an explanation. And it just kind of makes me throw my arms up and say, why assume that there aren't people who want to jump into this franchise with the second part instead of the first? Why not assume that maybe people who aren't giant fans of Dragon Ball Z, who know who this wide cast of characters are, might want to get a little bit of an explanation? It kind of baffles me that the major criticism of the first game, that without previous knowledge you couldn't really enjoy it, has again been completely glossed over with Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2. It's really frustrating. Now, that being said, if you are a fan of the Dragon Ball Z franchise and did play the original game, you're probably going to feel in familiar territory here and really enjoy the sequel. The improved attack animations, the wide variety of new attacks, the new customizations for your characters, etc. are a welcomed addition. In addition to that, there's all kinds of new style of missions, including giant battle co-op missions against Great Ape Saiyans and the like, and there's also new online capabilities of the game that are pretty neat. So if you have a bunch of Dragon Ball fans in your friend base or your family and you want to team up to do co-op online or even duke it out with your favorite warriors against each other in online multiplayer, all of that functionality is available in the game from the get-go. In addition, there is a ridiculously large amount of characters in the game that are all unlockable through various means. Some will be unlocked while you just play through the standard story mode, while others are unlocked by doing various side content missions in the game, whether they're the parallel quests that are what-if scenarios that you just simply play through, and by performing certain criteria during the fight, at the end you'll get an unlockable. A lot of the times you'll get some things through the notable side universe, side content in the game. So there's a lot in there, and by the time that you finish your experience, you're probably going to be ecstatic that you could play as some of your favorite characters in these really fun what-if scenarios. However, it does need to be said that once again, the game is incredibly repetitive, just like the first game. Once you're done creating your original character in Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2's character creation mode, you're immediately thrown into the open world city, of which is going to be your home for the majority of the game. You're going to be wandering around different locations and talking to different NPCs, some of which will have different side missions for you to perform that are as silly as just performing a pose that you learn by talking to other people, or you might have some characters who want you to go on a fetch quest to get an item or swap an item to get a better item. It's typical open world RPG style stuff, especially the kind of stuff that you would see in an MMO. So again, I have to make the comparison that Xenoverse 2 almost feels like an MMO that was turned into a standard style action RPG hybrid game, and it is a little bit bizarre in that way. But ultimately what you're going to realize with Xenoverse 2 is that it follows the same formula as the original game. Talk to a few people, unlock some missions, do the next story mission, and it's going to be a lot of combat, repetitive, just mashing buttons, and yes, the combat is refined to some extent. They did actually change a few things up in the combat engine and not make it so it's not the same repetitive thing over and over and over, and there is potential for large variation in combos. Except that, unfortunately, when you're fighting against the AI in this game, about maybe halfway through any established combo that you're doing, eventually it's going to do a reversal move and escape that combo. So it's really frustrating when you're trying to learn the combo system of the game and build up large combos, especially because there's some side missions in the game that require you to get a certain amount of hits, and all of a sudden the computer just decides, well, I'm just going to escape that combo and escape this combo. And ultimately what I found in the game, which is exactly what happened with the first game, instead of doing more advanced combos and strategies, I just found a very short combo that was very repetitive, but was incredibly effective because 9 times out of 10, the AI of the game would not escape it. It would allow me to deal the damage I needed, and then I could move on to the next opponent and or just keep repetitively doing the same combo to the enemy. Anytime I tried to do something with flair or something of a difference, it ended up kind of missing, or the character would escape it. And it's very frustrating, especially when you spend a lot of time grinding to maybe get enough of in-game currency to buy that new super powered finisher that you really wanted, or maybe you're really trying to get that achievement of, oh, I need to get a 50 hit combo, so I really need to keep this combo going, and then all of a sudden you throw out this super powered move that you've been working towards for hours. Oh, it misses almost all the time because the computer doesn't just stand there and take it, and there's really no way to stun the opponent to get them to stand there and have the move hit them in the face. It's pretty ridiculous. And the same thing with the combos. You have all these new abilities, half of them don't really do anything because half the time the AI is just going to get out of the way. Also, I did find that sometimes even if you had a bread and butter combo that would work 9 or 10% or 9 times out of 10, sometimes that combo would not work. The computer would inexplicably get out of it anyway, even if it didn't have the stamina required to do a reversal. Sometimes they would just fall out of the combo where they normally would land. They didn't land for whatever reason. Sometimes the scenery would get in the way. So ultimately, although the combat of Xenoverse 2 is a small step up from that of Xenoverse 1, it still has many, many ways in which it can be improved. And ultimately, after finishing the game, I kind of felt underwhelmed. Yeah, it's nice, but at the same time, it wasn't a big improvement from the first game. In a lot of ways, it felt like I was just playing the same game with a patch or an update rather than a whole new sequel. Sadly, that pattern of feeling that this sequel isn't much of a sequel, but instead just kind of a patched improvement to the first game, permeates the rest of it as well. The main story is incredibly short. It actually can be beaten in about 3 to 4 hours if it's all that you actually play. Unfortunately, you'll be impossible to do that because you have to level your character in order to scale with the difficulty jumps that happen between the story missions, so you're actually required to do some of the repetitive side content this time around, rather than just trying to turbo through the game by playing the story missions, which in a lot of ways was possible in Xenoverse 1. But it's basically just the same kind of game as the first game. You're a time cop. You're going through time trying to undo changes to the time stream. You'll be doing a what-if scenario fight where all of a sudden a factor changed, like a character who normally wasn't in this fight in the Dragon Ball Z lore is now there, or one character for some reason is superpowered now and looks like they'll win a fight they shouldn't have, so you have to right the wrong by coming in and letting the fight outcome be as it was supposed to be. The antagonists are not very interesting. There's the same exact antagonists from the first game, with the little variable here that they actually throw in some of the movie bosses, meaning the big baddie characters from the movies of Dragon Ball over the years, who really aren't part of the mainstream canon lore. But outside of that, there's nothing really new. It's the same exact formula of the first game. Play a few missions, now I need to level up. Play a few side missions, now I can go back to the story. Play a few of these, and it's all the same kind of repetitive grinding combat with no variation whatsoever. So again, if you're not a fan of the Dragon Ball Z franchise, and you don't know the backstories of these characters, and you don't already want to anticipate to see this highly awesome attack that you know that this character can pull off, and you're not interested in that, and you don't know the lore, it's really underwhelming and just kind of disappointing. Even me being a hardcore Dragon Ball fan, I've been watching both the Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z anime series for the past few months in anticipation of this game. I really found myself kind of not too excited once I actually got into the meat of the game. Yes, it was cool to level up my character, to get those stats up, to get new gear or whatever, but ultimately it's just more of the same, and it does feel like you're playing the same game, Dragon Ball Xenoverse 1, a second time with only real minor improvements to the formula. I don't understand why they didn't go for a new plot this time around. It's literally the same one from the last game, the same villains. I don't know why they couldn't create more variety in what you're doing. It just seems to me like they played it really freaking safe rather than trying to innovate. Now, in Dragon Ball Xenoverse 1, that was passable because the game was new. It was the first time you'd ever seen these hybrid kind of things in a Dragon Ball action combat game with RPG elements. But now, a year and a half later, to pay full retail price for a game that's almost identical to the first, that's a tall order. And again, I kind of have to call out exactly what I said last year. If you're not an existing fan of the Dragon Ball franchise, this game is non-existent for you. You're not going to want to play it, you're not going to enjoy it, and ultimately you're just going to feel like it's a grind fest with no proper story or anything to it, and you're going to hate the game. Just like Dragon Ball Xenoverse 1, I'll tell you right now, it's a 0 out of 10 if you're not an existing fan of Dragon Ball. I could not possibly recommend it to a single person who doesn't know anything about this franchise. Now, if you did play the original game and or you are a fan of Dragon Ball Z, you're probably going to get just about the same amount of enjoyment out of this game as you did with the first. Of course, keep in mind, they did add in a few interesting things, such as plot lines related to the Resurrection F movie, which was released recently, as well as some characters from Dragon Ball Super. So that's good that they're in the game and that you can unlock them or whatever, but ultimately, it leaves you feeling empty. Like, I wanted something bigger and better. I actually wanted an advancement in the franchise, not just more of the same, and that's what you got. So ultimately, reviewing this game, I've already told you, if you're not a fan of Dragon Ball, you're not going to like it, don't get it, it's a 0 out of 10. If you are a fan of Dragon Ball, and you did not play the first game, quite honestly, you'll probably like it more because it'll feel more refined and more original to you. If this is the first time you're playing it and you're experiencing the better graphics, the better customizations, the better attacks and controls and combat system, you'll probably like it a bit better. And I'll say, for those who are maybe playing this for the first time as a fan of Dragon Ball Z and you didn't play the first game, I'll probably say that Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 is an 8.25 out of 10. You'll like it just as much as if you played the original Dragon Ball Xenoverse last year for the first time as a fresh experience. But I'm going to be honest here. If you already spent $60 last year on the first game, Playing this one a year and a half later isn't different. It's literally the same experience with a few tweaks. It's not worth $60. This is a glorified patch. It's almost like if you own the first game, they should have given this game to you as a patch to the first one for $20 rather than charging you $60 a year and a half later to play through pretty much almost exactly the same game. In addition, the grinding, in my opinion, is too excessive in this game. There's too much of it, especially there's one quest line with the guru from Namek who you have to continuously capture Dragon Balls and outrun enemies and keep doing this. And you have to do this mission, I kid you not, like 14 plus times in order to finally finish that side mission structure and get the secret items so you can unlock a character at the end of the game. It's far too much of a grind and too repetitive. Ultimately, if this game didn't have as much grinding in it, it would probably feel like a better experience. Give me less repetitive side content grinding and more story elaboration. Give me more original stuff in the story that I'll enjoy, and that's sad that they didn't go that way. They actually made the story incredibly short while adding way more side content that ultimately doesn't really matter and has no real impact on your overall experience. So, if you already played Dragon Ball Xenoverse 1, I would probably say that sadly Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 is only like maybe a 7.5 out of 10 for you, because most of this stuff you've done already, and only playing with a small handful of new characters and the few tweaks that they've done to the engine, in my opinion, aren't enough to even warrant a full purchase. $60 is too much for just have tweaks on an existing formula in the modern gaming era. So, if you're not a fan of Dragon Ball, completely skip this game. If you're a fan of Dragon Ball and didn't play the original game, it's probably about an 8.25 out of 10. And if you did play the original game, sadly, it's going to be feeling like too much repetition and a rehash, probably about a 7.5 out of 10. As a final thought, I do want to say I did actually enjoy playing Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2, mostly because I was rewatching the Dragon Ball Z anime this year, and to see the live action 60 frames per second scenes happen that I just saw in the anime take place in the video game was pretty sweet. But outside of that factor, I can't really recommend this game for a purchase to almost anyone. I will say this, please, if they make a Dragon Ball Xenoverse 3, do something different and original. Don't adhere to the exact same formula. Please don't use the same plot again. We've now had enough, and sadly, if I find out that they are using the same thing next time around, I'm probably just gonna skip it, because $60 the first time, okay. $60 again for an experience that's far too similar, but paying another $60 to see what more minor improvements they've done, I'm not going there, and you shouldn't either. Well, that is it for my review of Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2, everyone. I certainly hope that you enjoyed my review, and if you did, please consider giving it a like right here on YouTube, as well as subscribing to this channel, KO Gaming, because I'm going to be putting out far more kinds of these videos in the near future, including all the upcoming releases till the end of the year, and my year-end series, which I do annually. Also, please check the description of this video right here on YouTube, where you can find links to my direct, raw playthrough of the game over on my YouTube channel, DSP Gaming, as well as to my Loot Crate discount code and my Patreon. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time right here on KO Gaming.